Hey everybody, it's Rich here, Leaving MAGA, leavingmaga.org. As always, we want to thank you for all of your support for everything we're doing. We appreciate all the engagement that you've also shown in our conversations with our Leaving MAGA leaders. We've got a new conversation for you today with Jay Gilley from the state of Alabama. Jay, welcome. It's good to see you again. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Rich. How about you?
Everything is good. Let's get right into it. So take us through your initial attraction to the MAGA movement. What was it about the movement itself, the Trump campaign, that really enticed you to join MAGA originally?
Mm. God, attraction's always like the phrase attraction to it is always tripped me up, I guess, because I do not feel like there was an attraction. It was I don't feel like there would have been a MAGA without people like me. You know what I'm saying? In terms of I feel like it was kind of built alongside our radicalization in the gaming community. Does that make sense, Rich?
Well, you were very heavily into gaming. So
Mm.
how much of that world would you say made you ready made for the MAGA movement? What was life for you like when you were very, very deep into the gaming community?
At the time, there had just been Gamergate, probably about 2 years prior to the 2016 campaign. So, there was a lot of, animosity in the gaming community. There was a lot of what we felt then was politics being brought into it.
So what were as you recall then, what were the specifics about women, let's say, in the gaming community that and the gamers whom you were around?
So, there's just a lot of animosity in general just about modern dating that had made men of my generation very just angry, um, apathetic, unempathetic towards certain topics. And so I remember that being a um, big contributing factor to allowing, excuses for you know who's, misogyny
Right.
and that initial attraction, towards that.
You know, gaming is an area that I admittedly don't know a lot about it. I always thought, and this is where maybe you correct me, Jay, if I'm mistaken on this, is I always thought that the precursor to QAnon was in gaming, that a lot of the misogyny, a lot of the anger felt by men, the incel
Mhm.
community, that a lot of it came from the gaming community, and then that eventually morphed more into QAnon. What was your what
I
were
do
your
remember I do remember being fed a lot of stuff that led to you've heard of Pizzagate, right?
right?
Okay, I do remember being fed a lot of information. There was a lot of, we heard about Epstein and all the stuff prior to Donald Trump, even announcing he was running. We heard about all that stuff. It was fed to us, through various sources, a lot of conspiratorial sources. Alex Jones, I believe, was one of them. Um, so we heard about the stuff. We'd heard, rumors that Hillary Clinton ate babies. We heard that, Democrats were, in a cabal of pedophiles, all this other stuff. Prior to that the whole QAnon thing just sort of melding in or, just sort of hijacking that or kind of just becoming the next step of that. That's where a lot of, susceptibility to that came. That's what made QAnon so believable is that we had been fed all that prior.
Right. Because I think a lot of people who are going to see this conversation are not familiar with what goes on in the gaming community.
I envy
And
those people.
I know as someone who you
Yeah.
were in your case so deep in it, and seeing what was happening, I'm wondering who were some of the major figures, as you remember, who were in the gaming community who were propagating a lot of this commentary and these beliefs about Democrats and about Hillary Clinton, like who were the main influencers in gaming as you remember?
In gaming, I don't know if there's at the time when it was starting, I wouldn't say that there was an influencer in gaming that did it. I would say it was, like I said, people like Alex Jones. I have to go back and look to see if there's anyone more influential, but I would say I know he did a lot, and it just so happens that a lot of us in that gaming community would watch him. Because I don't remember in a specific or like gamer who would do that at the time. There wasn't as many influencers. Now it feels like everyone, it feels like there's just a sea of them. There's so many different split up communities now, but it felt a little bit more unified back then. I do not remember a specific figure like that.
So you're mentioning Alex Jones. So what other?
Alex Jones, Infowars, Breitbart.
Okay.
I I can't remember like if Breitbart would actually say stuff like that. I just remember being fed anti, uh, you know, um, Democrat propaganda from, like I said, news sources as Breitbart.
When I was in MAGA, I will tell you, Jay, that I lived on Breitbart's site, and I would check Breitbart.com dozens and dozens of times a day. I would spend inordinate amounts of time in the comments section, and I had never really checked Breitbart's site before the 2016 election. Occasionally, I might see an article, but I didn't seek out Breitbart information or commentary. But in the lead up to the 2016 election, I started consuming Breitbart's media more often. And then after the 2016 election, it became gospel for me. So I'm wondering, you anticipated what I was going to ask, which is, who are the figures in addition to Alex Jones you were really listening to and you feel like had an impact amongst those you were around in the gaming community? Alex Jones, Breitbart. Were there any others you remember who are MAGA media influencers and people who are in that sphere, whom you feel like were influencing the people around you?
Prior to the 2016 or after?
Both, really.
Because prior to it, I don't like I said, I don't remember there being I remember it feeling so natural, almost, like, I mean, the evolution into falling into that, the MAGA ideology was so natural. It's insane kind of going back and looking at it, it was like that it felt absolutely natural. It felt absolutely just like, "No, this is just like I don't feel like I'm being influenced at all." I do remember, let's see, prior to the election, I started to maybe take Tucker Carlson a little bit more. I started listening to maybe Tucker Carlson a lot more. Um, I agreed with some of the things he said. Obviously, I didn't know. Obviously, it's due to the fact that I was uneducated on what he was doing and these certain talking points that he was using and the actual ideology he was espousing of why I found his talking points easy to digest and they made sense in at the time. After the election, I remember watching mm, a various source of people. There was someone on YouTube named Armored Skeptic. There was a up and coming person named Tim Pool, who I believe is now a little bit more known. I think he's actually ran around some of the Trump circles now. Milo Yiannopoulos, and do you remember him?
I remember him.
Mhm. Quite the character. Quite the character. Those are the figures that are kind of sticking out in my head at the moment in terms of serious influence.
These are names that I've heard so many times in different conversations with leaders who have left and others with whom we've had conversations. They mention Alex Jones, Breitbart, Tucker Carlson. Ben Shapiro has come up before,
Mm.
and I think that I think there's a lot of discipline in the MAGA media content, and it works. And I was saying to someone the other day that people don't watch, for example, Fox News to be educated. They watch Fox and to be informed. They watch Fox because the audience is addicted to rage and fear. And what Fox does and what other MAGA media do is they reinforce and affirm that fear and that rage. I can tell you, when I was in MAGA, I was addicted myself to the rage. I was always angry at somebody or something or some group. And it was after leaving MAGA that I came to understand that I had been addicted to this rage. And, it's a very traumatic way of living if you really think about it, to
Absolutely.
always think that that the people you disagree with pose an existential threat to our life and our livelihood and our family and our country. And that's exactly how I thought. And the media that I consumed, all it did was just reinforce that for me. So
And oh, no, please go ahead, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was about to say, I can remember that feeling that kind of rage all the time as well. Obviously, now that we've been out for a long time, my source, like, the reason why I was so addicted to that rage is I just felt angry in my own life, my own personal reasons, and that just consuming that kind of content full of rage and anger all the time just sort of felt natural for me because I was that all the time. Would you do you feel like any kind of similar?
Very much so.
Yeah.
After leaving MAGA, I remember thinking that I had been in these while in MAGA, I had been in these perpetual states of rage and fear and paranoia and despair and desperation. And that was us on the winning side. We felt that way,
Yeah.
right? As the victorious side. And yet I still had those feelings. And I was around a second family of fellow MAGA compatriots, and we all just affirmed for each other our emotions and our sentiments. And as embarrassed as I am to admit this, that MAGA second family oftentimes took precedence over my own blood family. And it seems that you had something of a MAGA community as well, even if it was mostly online. For me, it was a combination of in person and online, but there was not a day that went by that I did not communicate with my fellow MAGA brothers and sisters.
I see. I see. And for me, I mean, my mom to a greater extent than my father, was perfectly in line with all that stuff. She got radicalized through her own evangelical news, watching, she stays watching those fiery preachers, Um, and the other close childhood friend of mine who I hung out with all the time, almost every day, he lived with me sometimes. He got radicalized through the exact same method I did. And then our other childhood friend, he just kind of, yeah, he didn't really care. He was doing his own little thing, but he still kind of fell in line to that. I guess just do not being educated enough.
Talk about, Jay, if you would, your upbringing a little bit, because I know you grew up in a very, very conservative household.
Yes and no at the same time, if I'm thinking about it. I have a hard time. Hmm. So I was born into a family, and my mother is a evangelical. I went to public school for second grade, up until second grade, and I was removed. Oh no, wait, up until the third grade, it was removed in the third grade, and I was homeschooled. I had a brief attempt at it again in the sixth grade, wasn't for me. Went back into homeschooling, and up until I got my GED. The homeschooling program was very, very religious, very religious. And I do remember a lot of not really feeling, because while I was religious and I did believe a lot of stuff, I also did want some opposing views as a child. My mom's intensity with her stuff kind of created a little rebellion sometimes. Like, I kind of want to rebel against her sometimes, so I'd want opposing views. But for the most part, I mean, I did fall in, I did believe what she bled, or, what she had raised me to believe. So I grew up thinking, it's the rapture could happen any day. Any moment now we could all just be taken up and, our all that was going to happen. Armageddon. There was a constant battle of good versus evil going on, which that led, you could see how easy that would lead into being our already having that framework of a constant good versus evil your whole life. MAGA was easy to continue that ideology, even when you weren't believing in like God anymore, or even if you didn't believe in God or anything like that. It was still that. If you had been raised or had any kind of religious trauma related to that narrative, it's easy to fall into that.
Sounds a lot like MAGA.
Mhm.
Good versus evil battles, and almost with MAGA, I remember that having that militant way of thinking that we either crush our political opponents or they crush us first. This was the kind of
Mhm.
this is the kind of mindset that I lived with for more than half a decade. This way of thinking.
Do you remember thinking that? Because whenever I was first really getting that radicalization around like 2016, 2017, that the opposite side, most people on the opposite side were uninformed and not malicious.
Yeah. Well, I thought that they were. I did think there was malice.
Really?
Yeah, I remember even in a lot of my writings, I would refer to Democrats as malignant. This was kind of some of the this was the kind of language that I trafficked in, this kind of opprobrium about Democrats being domestic terrorists and worse than Nazis. I went on public record writing this and saying this. And so I thought that lots of Democrats were also very, very ignorant, but I thought it was more nefarious than that. I thought that Democrats were trying to abridge our rights, and I write it in my memoir. I write about a they, and they were mostly Democrats. They were people trying to take our guns, trying to indoctrinate our children in the public schools, trying to replace white people with brown people and foreigners, trying to transform America into a communist or socialist country, trying to who are persecuting Christians and trying to erode Christianity out of our culture. These were some of the beliefs that I held, and I knew lots of others who also shared these beliefs. And I wasn't, and I'm not now the most religious Catholic, but I was around evangelicals when I was in MAGA, including some who thought that Trump was sent by God. And even though I was an evangelical, I still allowed myself to be influenced by them.
Mhm. Um, yeah, no, I do remember thinking if we're talking about the organization of Democrats, I do remember thinking that was a more of a malicious thing. I, um, I guess I'm speaking more about the population. Like, I wouldn't say, like, the organization of the Democrats, I'm talking about, like, just the regular people. I can remember thinking that a lot of them were uninformed that would lean left and all that stuff. "Oh, you're just uneducated, you just don't know what you're talking about," yada, yada, yada. And I'm noticing now that sentiment is long gone. I mean, long gone. It is a strict us versus them.
Right.
Any kind of nuance has been completely removed. Any kind of charitability is completely removed. That has been completely stripped, and it's just interesting to watch that evolution.
Well, what are some of so Jay, take us through some of the reasons that made you start to doubt your support for MAGA and what eventually made you leave.
The biggest contributing factor to why I left was I got really isolated. Uh, Someone that I deeply, deeply, deeply cared about, that I, in hindsight, treated really terribly. Thought that I was really great at the time. Um, but I had pacing around the room, kind of talking to myself in my head, kind of having an imaginary conversation with her, and the conversation led to me questioning, like, to almost calming myself down from just such a psychotic rage that I was having at the moment. Kind of calm myself down and then just making me just sort of pause and go like, okay, wait, like let me assess why I needed her validation so much. And something as simple as that, as stupid as it sounds, led to me just starting to tear through my childhood. Like, okay, what about this specific thing? Why do I need it so bad? To the point where I am losing my absolute mind at feeling rejection. Um, and that sort of thing just sort of led to like, okay, exploring insecurities, exploring trying to explore the other viewpoint, like women's viewpoint from growing up, trying to understand more of how that developed and why there was such a difference there between just how we viewed the world. I just tried to come at it the most humanizing, way I could. Um, that really just led to going, okay. And then by the time, after spending a little bit more time doing that, I completely understood I got to watching all that content that once made me radicalized back in 2014, and I completely agreed with it. And it was so frustrating because I completely agree with everything they were saying. They were 100% right. And I was like, goodness. Like, you mean to tell me I got this upset, this radicalized over something I agree with now? That was frustrating. Um, and then one thing led to another, and George Floyd's murder happened, and I got fed on my Twitter feed a a vast a vast comparison of how white people be treated by the cops, how black people would be treated by the cops. And it was so in my face that I could not deny it. I would see the vast difference. And it broke all these narratives about, oh, the whole All Lives Matter movement and the Blue Lives Matter. It just broke it all down. I just couldn't do it. I was like, oh, goodness gracious. We had been so wrong on this. They were entirely right with all of this stuff they were talking about. And we were just so caught up in trying to justify the way we felt. We were so caught up in trying to justify ourselves at that point, and we just completely missed everything else. Is the best way I can shorten that down. Because I'm sure we don't have 9 hours to talk about this.
Well, I think I always say when people ask me what does leaving MAGA look like, the answer that I always give is that we reclaim our individuality, our agency, and our empathy.
Mhm.
And you definitely, I think, Jay, did all the above. I think you reclaimed your individuality, your agency, and you rediscovered empathy. As you're talking about the relationship you had with the female, that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that you tried to put yourself in someone else's shoes,
Yeah.
and
Oh, God.
that's what empathy is.
Yeah. And let's use the term woman. If I hear the word female has been
Woman.
absolutely ruined thanks to those people, I'm like, oh, God, I hear female now. I'm just like, I just immediately get to, it's like, oh, God, the Andrew Tates of these worlds have just wrecked men's minds, and it's so frustrating.
Okay, woman it is.
Not, not to go all social justice on you, Rich.
It's okay. No, that's what I'm here. See, I'm here to learn also. Let me ask you this in closing, Jay. So you've done a testimonial with us, which I encourage everyone to read at our website at leavingmaga.org. We're doing our conversation today. Why do you feel the need to speak out about this and about your experiences?
Hmm. Several different ones. One is it's important to try to get as much of how it happened as honestly as we possibly can out there for just as society, we're going to need exactly how it happened in order to reverse it, in order to just, correct it. And then also how to avoid that in the future. Two, it also just helps. It helps people not feel so alone when they see other people talking about it. It's the other people being as honest and open as they can. Like, hey, look, this is what happened to me. It's okay. It's not okay, but it's okay to talk about, like, with us. Like, come over here and just talk to us about it. And trying to get more people to feel comfortable with changing their mind is very important because, as we were just talking about, there is no nuance anymore. And so it is very important to show, like, hey, look, you can change and you can talk about this. And there's a path out. There's a way forward. It's not easy. It's definitely would have been a lot easier a couple of years ago. It's really, really hard now. But I think that's probably one of the most important things. And also just an apology for the behavior as well.
I love everything you just said, and I want to just reiterate that you're an invaluable member of our community, and you show a lot of intrepidity and courage by speaking out, by telling your story. And I appreciate everything you've done as one of our leaders. And so I just want to once again publicly thank you for all that you've done in how you've spoken out, but also everything you've done with our organization at Leaving MAGA. So tell us where people can find you on your socials.
Let's see. I'm not as active on TikTok and Blue Sky. Well, I'm a little bit more active on Blue Sky, but TikTok, Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads. At Dear Us or Dear US, Dear Us, Let's Talk. You can find me there. It's all the same user handle, all one word, on each one.
Okay, and we've got the handle up on screen as well for people to see it. And again, I would encourage everyone to get to our website at leavingmaga.org. You can get more information on Jay's story. You can subscribe to our newsletter that way. You can follow us at our socials. There's information about our Tuesday night support group. There's also information about my memoir, One Betrayal Too Many, which you can all get at leavingmaga.org. Jay, I just want to again express my gratitude for all that you've done, and I thank you for your conversation with me today.
We'll have to have another one, man.
Anytime.
I do appreciate it, Rich. We'll have to have more.
Anytime. Thank you, Jay.